Vaughn Clemmons.
James McNeil.
How you doing this morning?
I'm doing good, bro. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we were just having a good laugh over maybe old habits dying hard. You having what I joked was the fax machine right next to your desk.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah,
And coming
you
from where I came from, we were still using fax machines when I started. So yeah,
well, um it was probably a revolutionary technology at the time.
it was.
So the yeah, I've heard all kinds of cool stories over the years from different guys on that subject.
Yes, yes. I'm quite sure as we get into it, I'll give you all kinds of cool stories.
Yeah. Well, I think there's something special about how this happened, Vaughn, for me. Um, you said before I could kind of be what did you say the other day? You said I could be tough, but I'm soft.
Oh yeah, you're a soft-hearted bull.
You're a soft-hearted boy. I think what you actually said was uh, James is tough on the outside, but he's soft as a ball of cotton.
Yeah, and you really are, bro.
Well, to that point, I've had a lot of different emotion around doing something like this. I've been a very private person, and I think that you and other people from the ARA and that run up to your leadership that I'm sure we'll talk about, that brought me in the fold. But something like this is it's an honor to do this with you first. For my first episode to be with you, I was telling my wife, I almost felt like I needed to do some other episodes first, and we had that planned, and you saved the day on some rescheduling, um and it almost put even more pressure on me because of how much respect and admiration that I have for you, and likewise, I know that the industry holds in their heart for you, man.
I appreciate
Um,
that.
so I'm honored to have you here today, and I look forward to people getting to know you even better than they already do.
I look forward to that as well. And like I said, it's an honor for me to be with you, James, on this, historic first time ever podcast. And I actually enjoy being the first. Hopefully there's many to follow that will be much better than me, but it's a good way to kick it off.
Absolutely. The Gosh, where do we start? I think for me, more important than like policy and where we head and where the industry is going is I want to know where it began for you. And even further back than auto repossession, who was Vaughn at 5, 10 years old? Who is this young man?
I got a lot to say, James, and you can just stop me at any time because
Yeah,
like you, I talk a lot. And most people wouldn't know this, but I'm an introvert at heart. Just rather be, like you said earlier, quiet to myself and kind of standoffish without the standoffish demeanor, exterior. But I just celebrated my 61st birthday last week. And next week, Alicia and I, we're going to celebrate our 40th wedding anniversary. And that's my high school sweetheart, best friend, and without question, the greatest blessing God has ever placed in my life. And we've had a credible journey together. We've raised two amazing sons. One of my sons is in the business with me, preparing to take over in a couple, 3 or 4 years. I have a 38-year-old and 36, and we've been blessed, highly blessed. We have four healthy, amazing grandchildren. And when people meet me today, they see who I am today. To your point, who was I before being the former president of the ARA? Someone who spent over 4 decades in this business. What they don't see is the journey that it took to get me here. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, in a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house with 15 people. So we had 13 kids, my mother and my stepmom, my father and my stepmom. And just imagine that 15 people sharing one bathroom. you know, today, I mean, I got 5 bathrooms in my house and it's only Alicia and I, so, but by many people's definition, when you hear that story, you immediately think, well, Jesus, these guys were poor. We weren't, you know, but I never felt being poor. Growing up, we didn't have much. We learned how to stretch everything, but we appreciated what we had. Never went hungry. And one of my greatest lessons at an early age was taught to me by my father, who is, if you don't take care of the little things, you'll never appreciate the bigger blessings when they come. My father was a minister, and I was raised in church where I attended church 3 times a week. He ruled our home with an iron fist. And certainly, there's a lot of things he did to me that I chose not to carry into my, own family, how I raised them. But he did teach me responsibility. He taught me discipline, and that every action, good or bad, has a consequences. I raised my sons on that premise. I'll tell you something else. There's a stark difference between growing up in a church and truly knowing God. I knew about God because I was raised in church, but I didn't
Right.
truly understand faith until I had seasons in my life where faith was all I could stand on. And I'll end with this. I'll end about my defining moments, and I'll let you take over. As an adolescent, and I started running away from home when I was 8 years old, and I constantly ran away. And my dad was going to put me into a home because they considered me as an unruly child. And all my life, it was just in my youth, was just me trying to pull away from what was considered the norm in my home. Um, Long story short, my mom came back from New York, where I was raised, where I was born at. I was born in Brooklyn, and she came, and instead of going to the home, I was able to go back and live with my mother in Brooklyn. I was 12 years old. Less than 8 months later, she passed away from cancer. I was 13. And losing your mother at 13 years changes your life forever. I mean, I was still a kid. I only really spent 6 years total with her, from birth to 5 years, then moving to Cleveland, and then moving back with her at 12. Um, so eventually, when she passed away, I returned back to Cleveland, but I worked more than ever. I worked my whole life. In fact, I dropped out of high school many times because I believe earning a paycheck was more important to me than earning a diploma. And of course, then God placed someone in my life. And I'll let you, I don't want to just
So
talk because I'm good.
that that moment of not being with your mother, and then having that opportunity to move back and be with her, and having that taken away so abruptly
Mhm.
at such a formative age, how I got to imagine that has a profound effect on how you value the time with your beautiful family that you've built.
Yeah. And the fact of the matter is I did not really understand family. Um, I mean, we had a family unit growing up, but we weren't really a family. Um, on my one of my days of signing out of school, because I dropped out of high school multiple times, but I was dropping out of high school and I was walking down an empty hallway after saying goodbye to one of my teachers that I did bake. I baked. I cooked through high school, so I worked at a restaurant, and I was a pretty good cook. So I would make her cakes and whatnot. And I went to say goodbye to her and one other teacher. And as I'm walking down this empty hallway, standing there was this beautiful girl named Alicia, you know. Um, and what she was waiting there for was because she knew that was the path I took every day coming out of gym. And that was the period I decided to just take off. She was waiting there because she needed a date for homecoming. and she had no idea, but I had no idea. She was just asking me for a dance. But that chance moment, I think there's a country song that we love to listen to that, chances are, like, had I not met her, where would I be today? But she changed my life because till her, I honestly didn't know what a loving family looked like. And after losing my mother at such an early age, her mother, because I was 16 at the time, her mother became a second mom to me. Her family welcomed me in. They loved me. They showed me something that I never really experienced before, a family that genuinely enjoyed being together and loving one another unconditionally. She taught me something that my upbringing never did, which is what family really meant. She inspired me to go back to school because she was a captain of the cheerleading team. She was just everything. She was involved in everything. I was involved in nothing. In fact, I had never attended a football, basketball, or any kind of game in my high school life because I was working or dropping out, you know.
Right.
But that was going back to school and earning my high school diploma at that time. And it still is. It's one of the proudest moments of my life because people throughout my life told me I'd be dead before I turned 16. And if you look at today, I'm 61. So in the opposite, I've made it to 61 years, and only God's grace can explain that path. When I look
Absolutely.
back over my life, James, I've experienced a lot of loss, a lot of failure, a lot of disappointment, and moments where I had, truly had no answers. Those are the moments that taught me what faith really is. God's grace has covered me far more times than I could ever could deserve or imagine. And he extended that grace to me then and through life that I extend to everyone that I meet. Because God has a funny way of sitting you down when you can least expect it. And those lessons are always painful. But what it's done for me is it's humbled me and reminded me to never forget the path I took and where I've come from.
So having Alicia's light just immediately have this effect on your life, bring you in. It wasn't. It seems, it feels like it immediately showed you this family, and it showed you this model, maybe something that I could imagine from my own experience, my family being split, and not to the same degree or not to the same experience that you had, but not being around my father and having that need that you immediately felt at home with
Yes.
her family. You
Oh,
immediately
yeah.
just felt right.
Most definitely. And because they were such a loving family, it was easy. Something you've never experienced is easy to just fall in love with. And
So Alicia, um, so there's these early defining moments. These are what helps to build our character, um, to value love and life and beauty. You have to experience the pain, and you have to experience those moments. Unfortunately, some of us experience them much more dramatically than others, but we all have that choice.
yes,
Um, and clearly, Vaughn and Alicia together as this team, and with all this love and light that Alicia brings you, you have made incredible choices throughout that journey. What was the first? So you're in high school. You got going back to school with her.
yes,
She's encouraging you to go get your diploma.
yes.
What's the next most defining moment?
Well, graduation, of course. And then we never separated. We were like, you know, folks were thinking we were brothers and sisters. We hung around so much together. I was always over their house eating, because at in that stage in my life, I was going through some things. I was living with my sister, and she had kids, and it was tough. But Alicia and I married at a very young age. I got my first apartment when I was 19. And I had to convince the guy, who was a very shrewd businessman who owned the apartment complex. One of his things was he never let anyone come into his buildings if they were under 21. you know, I was 18 going on 19. And I had a little money from working so hard. So I convinced him if I gave him double the deposit,
Yeah.
double the deposit going in and double the deposit going out. So 4 months rent. Um, and he said, okay, I'm willing to take that chance. So he allowed me to move in as the first in his complex, which was good for me because I needed,
Vaughn already identifying hurdles and figuring out how to overcome them without
yeah,
excuse,
yeah.
right? Like,
That's just,
listen, this is a transaction here. I'm sure we can figure it out.
that's right. So Alicia and I married, I was 21 and she was 20. And a lot of people didn't think we'd ever make it. In fact, her mother told me, who was a dear friend of mine, I considered her my mother. She pulled me aside and said, listen, you do not have to marry her and we'll still be friends. That's just, come on, you don't get that. But I married her anyway. And 40 years later, we're still proving those naysayers right, but like most couples, we, especially young, we had a lot of life to figure out, because I really grew as a man through with Alicia, so there was a lot of trials and tribulations that we faced. Most of them were sparked by me being a young man full of bullish ways and no common sense, but no sense in what life really meant. But I did have a zeal of business. In high school, I had a catering business, it's no party too large or small, just crazy. But then when I got out of high school, we went to college, did about 2 years. And I had my own carpet cleaning business. And that was good, but it was tough. It was because I had to pay for my rent. But I was always looking for an opportunity to do something better, but always on my own, because I had 7 brothers, and 4 of them went to the military. I was in the camp, and I didn't want anybody telling me what to do. So I didn't join the military. I figured I had more opportunities making my own way. So one day I saw a newspaper ad, and it said repo man. I'm like, what's a repo man? But it said how much money you had the potential to make. And I had one suit, and Alicia called it my favorite gray suit. And I put that suit on, and when I walked in, the lady there who interviewed me, named Bev Codner, she laughed at me. I mean, like her and her, I guess he was a skip tracer. They were laughing at me like, you don't come into a repo job with a suit on. But I just thought that's what you did when you went for a job interview. But she hired me anyway. She stuck me out in the back lot playing with Slim Jims and understanding how to unlock a car. And then she sent me in the streets of Cleveland to train with a guy for 3 days. And then they sent you out on your own. Now, back then, James, there was no tow trucks. Okay. You used your personal car. You had a array of tools. I had tons of screwdrivers, force tool, Slim Jims, sucker tools. And my favorite was a slide hammer. And all those tools did different things with different ignitions, because we didn't attack the column because that was too much damage. We attacked the cylinder, the ignition cylinder. And we would either extract ignition or force the ignition over. There was no other way around it. But I was pretty good at that. And my first repossession was off of 131st and Miles. Anyone listening to this who knows Cleveland know that area has been pretty rough for years. And there was the Buick that I was looking for sitting in the driveway. And I jumped up, Slim Jim the vehicle. And let me tell you, before I started that, I went and found my high school buddy, asked him if he wanted to make a couple bucks a car, $20 a car that we got. He jumped on hook, line, and sinker. I was making $55 a car, paying for my own fuel, my own car. There was nothing like what we have today. But the $55 still remains in some parts for these drivers. But anyway, I got in, forced ignition over, and as I started it, the alarm went off. And as I'm backing out of the driveway, gunfire just all over the place. Bullets were hitting the car. And as I sped away, of course, most people would have quit. Well, I fell in love with the thrill. And, looking back, I realized it wasn't the danger I loved. It was accomplishing what others thought couldn't be done. Helping lenders to recover their collateral in areas of the city of Cleveland that most folks would not go into. I had no fear. And back then our industry was the Wild Wild West. So there was no body cameras. There's no GPS. There's no cameras on the vehicles. It was no compliance, if at any. It was honestly a whole bunch of cowboys, and I was one of them. And I took risks that I would never allow my employees to take today. But experience has a way of humbling you. And I kind of go back to God's grace, James, because he was covering me in those moments when I was doing things that was not just morally right, but they were illegal. Today we would see that as you're going to go to jail, but I was one of those guys that if I saw a car, it was coming back with me.
Right.
But I've been blessed, James. I've had some incredible mentors like Tom Veach with Cleveland Auto Recovery and Jerry Ray. And Tom especially, he taught me something that I carry to this day, and I've carried to my entire career, which is businesses aren't built by the owners. And he was an owner. He was very well-to-do owner. He taught me that you, the employees, you are the ones who build this business. And he treated us as such. And eventually I started my own company in Cleveland. course, I had no understanding about business. I knew everything about picking up a car, everything. So I made a lot of mistakes. Um, and most of those mistakes eventually led me and Alicia having to move from the city of Cleveland and experience an entirely different life. We sold our home. I was 26 years old, 23, 24 when I purchased my first home. But we sold our home, packed, and the home sold in 4 days. So we really weren't ready. We didn't know any better. We put the house on the market in 4 days. It was gone. But we took everything we owned in a U-Haul and we moved to Texas. And I promised Alicia as I was leaving Cleveland, because of what was going on in Cleveland, I would never get back in repossession business. Well, that promise lasted for about 2 months, because repossession, it wasn't just what I did, it was who I was. And it was something that supported the family because I already had 2 kids who depended on me bringing in money. But the decision ultimately led me to build this career that I've been blessed with to this day.
What year was that first repossession?
Jesus, it was 1986.
1986. Wow. And almost 18 years later, people were still taking cars that way when
Yeah,
there was, I
yeah,
remember seeing people with sling trucks even 5 or 8 years ago, uh, there's there's a long adoption curve to bring everybody forward in technology, but you've set at a unique perspective um, to see almost each version of
yes,
auto repossession
yes,
and to see it from different areas of the country, to have been a son of New York and then adolescent of Ohio, and then moving to Texas as a young man, a young father, um, but also seeing multiple different types of the industry. What do
yeah.
you think about those? What do you think about those different moments, and not just like technology brings us forward, but also what was good about those moments? What was better, or what was good about those different moments in repossession?
Tell you, that's a great question, James. And it costs a lot less to operate in the space 40 years ago than it did today. Um, we had things like tryout keys, a box of 100 keys that you would go through every key, flipping it over on the 10 cuts to see if they would work. I never used those because it just took too much time. But we had tools that were prehistoric. And today we have a barrage of tools. I mean, from the cameras, the DRN cameras, to the body armor, all the stuff that we use today to affect the repossession costs so much more than it did back then. Yet the prices, the fees, the fee structure still is the same as it was 40 years ago. The difference is 40 years ago, we controlled the space. We controlled the industry. We lost that along the way. And that's what began the demise or the disintegration of our business. So to answer your question, 40 years ago, the difference was it was a lot cheaper and it was a space that we controlled. Today, it's a lot more expensive, and it's almost unimaginable how we're able to even survive on what we've been making with it being stagnant decade over decade with the same rates.
One of the things I think might be helpful for you to share is how much different the relationship with law enforcement and auto repossessors was early in your career versus today, where although we have to be careful of color of law and allowing, you know, that influence of a police department within our repossession, and there's sort of like a space for which we have to stop. And now, because police have entered the situation, now we need to leave. But in 85, you weren't always sure if you weren't going to get arrested, regardless of having done something right or wrong, because the relationship with law enforcement was different.
That's absolutely. And the law enforcement didn't really care for us because, especially riding around in a car, we looked like thieves. It wasn't like we had a truck with insignia on the side. We just were driving around in a regular car going down streets at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Police really didn't respect us at all. I'm not saying they do today, but they, they didn't respect us at all back then. And I was arrested multiple times, um, put it face down on the ground, handcuffed, until they can determine that this vehicle was in fact up for repossession. Most of the municipalities had a place where you had to stop it at the police department first, report the repossession, like most do today. And if you did not, you were on the other side of the law. And I was arrested multiple times because I saw a car and I just took it without following protocol.
Yeah. So the protocol was reversed.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. And funny enough, we still get them occasionally, small or large jurisdiction. They'll just have this sense that we should be requesting permission from them to conduct this activity. And it's not an unreasonable thought, but it's impractical, and it's also constitutionally not the correct look at private property and the rights of the lender and and the investor to obtain their property back through the private act. But I find it so much I find it so interesting because even my career starting much later than yours. Geez, I guess I was 4 years old when you did your first repossession.
You know what, James? No one asked you to say that.
Hey, you started the episode off with 61, which I feel like is just right around the corner for me. I'll celebrate my 45th birthday this January.
Oh, congratulations.
But I mean, you look amazing, Vaughn. You've obviously lived a very interesting life.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people say that they're thinking of like these stories and this like this this like rock star lifestyle or this kind of adventurous, crazy lifestyle. But like what I admire about it, and maybe I think you and I have a certain connection. I think a lot of repossessors have this same thing where they're doing something that um, requires you to have a certain understanding, empathy, integrity, but also you have to have that bit of that wolf inside of you. You have to have a bit of that, whether it's a protector, or maybe it's not just a protector. Maybe there's something else deep in there that whatever it be, through God or through love or through life or through your family, you have these dualities. And I see that very much in you. I know that I seen you from across the room the first time. I was probably trying to convince you that my software was better than another. And at the time, and you carry a presence to yourself, and you carry a presence and a pride and pride's probably not the right word, a presence and a confidence of a man who is has the experiences from the side of the table that we talked about at the beginning of the episode, but also has the conviction and the moral compass of, I'm looking at the family behind you, and I've seen these beautiful grandkids are so adorable, but like this duality between the two people that you are, I think is perfect for an auto repossession agent or owner, because you have to be safe and you have to protect yourself, but you're holding so many other people's needs before your own, whether it's the bank or the customer or the danger that's happening around you, and the amount of different things that you have to take in balance. I think, you know, I guess the question is how do you find that in people, and how do you find that in people, and how do we continue to find that in people if the trade doesn't change into craftsmanship, without it being honored as a craftsmanship, without it being honored as a highly skilled trade and quality? How do we continue to find that dynamic person who has all those qualities?
You just said it right there. Until this space is respected as a profession, um, we'll forever be beholden to the powers that be. And I'm not saying that we don't need some oversight, because I really firmly believe in that. Not government oversight, but at the association level. I believe there's a need for that. But find that right person requires us to have standards that we must set. There's must be code of ethics, standards that we as an industry pull together and say this is what we need, and stop allowing folks outside of this space to set the standards for us. Um, there, there it is right there, James. You really, you'll find the right people because people have to qualify. And I'm not saying any of the owners today um, hire folks that are, unqualified, but there's some that do. And those that do, and those who are not, don't have any oversight over them, are the ones that are more likely to get us in trouble. We may not be the ones directly affected by that, not being in a business relationship with that person. But when someone does something negative in the repo space, it affects us all. And therein lies the problem. So trying to find the right person, I think first we need to set some standards. First, we need to make sure that we control who comes into the space. And I'm not trying to say that we're trying to like lock folks out, but if you're doing this job, you must understand that consumers and the protection of them matters first, close second to you. You be coming back home safe. That's my short answer on that question.
Yeah, for me, it's such a dynamic role that they play, whether it's in the most simplest form, you're a tow truck driver, but you're not. You're so much different than that. You're somewhat part of you as a security guard, and then another part is an investigator, and another part is a counselor.
Yes.
And how could one person be expected to be all those things and then not have it respected as a craftsmanship for which they're that is honored through the income and life that they're able to build, and beyond the agencies,
Yes.
and beyond the forwarding companies and the lenders who all have their different interests. The health of the market is dependent upon people being able to build a good life for themselves.
Great. I agree with everything you said. You're spot on. And I say this a lot, James, and it's almost like it's folks probably understand that's who I really believe this to my core, that we are our own worst enemies. And we've been that for a very long time. That's part and parcel of the plight we find ourselves in right now.
Yeah. Um, so early life and repossession, you decide to transition. Now you're in Houston. So you and I went separate directions at different times. I was born in Houston. I'm a native son, but
Yes.
we gladly accept you as a Texan.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, right? Well, I
I
love
have
Texas.
I have the native son sticker on my jet ski. Everybody's like, "What is that? You're
What is
not
that?
native." Like, we were our own country. Um,
We still are.
so how did Texas change you?
Oh, Jesus. I started off in Dallas, and I started off going to work for American Lenders. When I first got here, I was working for a fellow named Todd Hognan. And most folks know Todd as the owner and developer of RDN and DRN. And Todd was one of those guys where he just gave me the keys to the kingdom and said, go run it. Here's a guy who knew absolutely nothing about running a business, and he said, just do it. And I started off towing cars. I started off as a repossessor. I stayed a repossessor for working for him for probably 3 months. And then he gave me the keys to the building. And from that, I had to learn. I had to learn how to use an email. I had to learn how to use Microsoft Word. And I mimic folks very well. So the folks that were doing things in the business, I mean, I had about probably 5 folks that worked inside. I would copy their letters. I would copy their emails and I would mimic them because I didn't know anything about anything as far as working a business. Keep in mind, here's a guy who started a business using fake insurance. Okay. My biggest client back then in Cleveland was Bank One. I don't even know if they're in business anymore, but they're a huge bank. And I used a false insurance certificate. So this is me. And in Dallas, I ran his operation for probably 5 years. And then I moved on to Houston, where I opened up American Lenders in Houston, my wife and I. And that was good. That was a good journey. It taught me a lot. One of the good things about American Lenders, starting off there, for a guy who had no process and procedure uh, mentality, was it taught me that. It taught me how to do things in a structured way and how everything matters. And so Alsco, many folks saw that as a deterrent, and it would grab folks that were on the bottom of the rope. I saw Alsco for me as a blessing because it taught me so much that I did not know. Before you know it, I was teaching classes for Alsco at their conferences. So it was a journey. Getting to Houston, that business lasts for 10 years. And I, for one, uh, did not still fully understand business. And I ran a lot of things with my gut. So when we lost business, 10 years of working for Alsco doing that deal, um, when it fell under, my biggest client was Chrysler Financial and Triad. And we made a lot of money. And when they moved to the forwarding space, I believe Par was the one who took them back so many years ago when they first entered the space. It pretty much put us out of business. And Alicia and I, we struggled hard to keep those doors open because I think we had about 20 employees. And we went through everything, our entire life savings that we had built just to keep people in a job. But eventually that fell through. We had to file business bankruptcy. We had to get out of the deal. And when I tell you, James, how good God is, and I know folks believe in different things, but I believe in God, and I believe He has covered me my whole life. And anyway, I had about 6 tow trucks and I had a flatbed, and I had to file bankruptcy. I owed American Lenders almost $500,000. There was no way I could pay it. So I just one day I got a traffic ticket, in Tomball, and it was a bogus ticket, so I hired an attorney. This attorney was freaking unbelievable. We just clicked. It was just a traffic ticket, but he gave me his number. He said, "Listen, anytime you need anything, just call me." Well, lo and behold, 6 months later, I need a bankruptcy attorney, so I called him. He told me, he says, "Listen, man, I got a really good friend of mine, but he practices in San Antonio, um, and I'm going to ask him for you if he would do this favor for me." I didn't even know this guy, James. You know, he just defended me in traffic court, and this is what he extended himself to be, his personal friend. Anyway, this guy was a freaking rock star. Or he was a freaking rock star. Alicia and I traveled to San Antonio, but he told me he would take the case. Um, no problem. We gave him all the information he needed. And our first hearing in front of the trustee, we walk in, and it's his freaking girlfriend from freaking college. Come on, man. Long story short, we were able to keep every one of our assets, all the trucks, everything. And everything else was wiped clean. That's God's goodness. And from that, we were able to start a transport company, transporting cars. And eventually I landed at ARB. And I remember when I first came to ARA meeting about 15 years ago, not one person spoke to me. Nobody greeted me. There was no handshakes. There was no smiles because I wasn't part of that circle. But there was one person who welcomed me, and that was Les McCook. And I never forget that. Just imagine being in a room full of folks in suits and ties, and you're not even looked at. You're like overlooked, and that's what I got. So if you looked at me back in the day when I was repoing vehicles in Cleveland and told me I'll be the president of the American Recovery Association, some 40 years later, I would have laughed in your face. But back then, the ARA felt like a closed door organization, and that was what they were because that's how they started. For so long, folks, if you were a part of that book, you were a select group, a select few. And they looked at to be a closed door society. And during my presidency, that's one of the things I wanted to change. I wanted people to honestly feel that if you were in the recovery business, you belonged. If you were a professional and wanted to learn how to operate, the ARA wanted you. And if you saw me in conferences, James, I never stopped talking to people. I don't care who it was. I never wanted someone to feel like I felt. I never wanted someone to feel like I was on the podium and they were in the cheap seats. The ARA had a way of doing things back then where they had their names in blocks, big blocks, on the podium, and they all stood up my first year, I took that away. We will not stand up and look down on our membership. That was my belief. I never felt like that was the right way to go because people felt like they were looking up to you, and they owed you something. I believe my message was unity requires us to all think like we're in this together. And I can go on and on, but that's my I believe in that to the core, that we are not higher than anyone. The presidency of the ARA did not make me feel like I was better or over anyone because, as I said earlier, I never forget where I come from. And as quick as you rise, you'll fall the same way. Trust me, I've been there.
The so having that beginning with the organization, and what, about 12 years later was when you were moving into looking at potentially becoming the president or running for presidency, running for the board. How did that journey look like for you, and how did
Bro,
you end up with that?
I didn't even want this. I was a board member for Alsco for years. And that was the furthest thing from my mind, trying to be on the board of the ARA. But Les McCook tapped me and asked me to join on the board, and I did. And I was voted in, uh, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot by sitting and observing and being quiet and trying to understand. I pride myself in not speaking until I fully understand what's going on. Usually, you'll see me. I won't speak until I have something formulated in my mind that comes out that will not hurt or impede the conversation. I believe in making sure my point is heard. Let me tell you something, James. Most people don't know this, but growing up, I could not talk at all. I had a twisted tongue, and even today, I struggle with the S's and the T's. I had to go to speech therapy for years, uh, just to learn how to talk. So that being an introvert and having that as well, it compounded the ability, my hesitant to talk. I would rather just be quiet. But over the years, I've learned how to, formulate sentences and talk in a way that means something. But I still carry that hesitation before I speak because my speech was very bad.
I think
Um,
some of us could learn that hesitation.
yeah,
Myself, namely,
that's
I,
funny.
I, actually, what's funny about this whole scenario here, and just having fun with what we're doing here, and not taking it too serious.
Yes,
Although you know me, I'm going to take it really serious.
yes,
Is looking at developing a particular quality that I'm not as good at. And you know, part of this for me is genuinely wanting to listen and allow, your mind naturally begins processing as soon as someone's talking,
yes,
whether it's body language or the verbal, nonverbal cues, or it's the actual information. You have to start processing that somehow.
yes,
And then naturally you start kind of thinking of a response. And it's very much a skill that I've noticed in you. I think I've even sat across from you and messaged you like, what are you thinking? 'Cause you're not verbal. And then I'm the opposite, or I am I'm thinking out loud and I'm questioning each one of the different assertions that somebody may be making, or I'm making my own assertions on the topic. And I think that the skill of listening and questioning, um, not questioning in a interrogatory,
yeah,
prosecutorial way,
yes,
but questioning in a genuine need for understanding, I
yes,
think is a skill set that I've seen you. I've seen you employ, and it's one that I admire in you, and it's one that I think a lot of people see as a strength.
yeah.
I know that
Uh,
you're saying that it's coming from a place of growth, and I think all of us should try to do that. But it's also a skill. It's also very much, they say that people that uh, are genuinely more likable, that the more questions they ask.
I'll tell you this, and was one of the things. Alicia and I were the marriage minister leaders of our church for years, and most of the things we encountered when we met with with couples where they didn't understand what active listening meant. And that's the key. The quality has to be, I will sit here and listen to you until you pause. And when I speak, I will repeat something you said so that you knew and know I was listening to you. That's the start. So to your point, James, it starts with just being able to listen. Because sometimes when you're formulating the response, you're putting that together and you forget a key point that's been said. So being married for 40 years, all the history I've had in leadership and learning, that's a key quality, is just being able to listen and making sure the person that's in front of you truly believes you're hearing them. So you can't be on your phone. You can't be looking away. You can't be dealing with paper. You have to sit back and actively listen. Just like you're actively driving, you must pay attention just like that. So that's a quality. All of us had it. We just
How
choose
has
not
that
to use it.
how has that helped you in being the president of your company and growing that early on really quickly to 20, but I'm
Yeah.
sure by now you're gosh, you got to be 75, 80. Are you even bigger
Stop.
than that now? Are you
Stop,
100?
stop it. I
How
will
big
tell
are
you
you?
how it's. I'm 61. Just
No,
turned.
no, your company
Oh,
size.
well, the
Gosh,
company. I'm sorry. The
you
company's
thought
been.
I was calling you 75 years old?
Yeah, I thought you were, but the company, believe it or
Your
not,
company, your size of your company.
the company has only been in business for 65 years. So it was before me. It's a family business. It started off with Brad and Brian Long, and
Okay.
then each of the Clemmons have now taken over, and we've been running the reins for a decade now. Um, but what helped me was one of the things I've learned a long time ago, especially from growing up in the streets, is that your mouth could get you killed, and your tongue is like a razor, like a sword. And I always look to think first before I speak, because I never know how I'm going to present myself to someone, and how they may perceive what I'm saying. If I can formulate that and then keep in mind that my intention is not to hurt, um, then the words will come out right. So I believe in listening, and I believe in making sure I pause before I speak. Even if my mind says do this, um, I will make sure I cautiously, because I still have the street smarts, I still have the street sense. And growing up, eh, going through junior high school in New York, in the streets of Brooklyn, growing up in the streets of Cleveland, um, there was things that would get you killed by just from your mouth. So I have incorporated that in my business life, and it's worked.
Yeah. And working with employees, we were talking about the disconnect between the skill set, the quality. Obviously, you have to be a little bit eccentric to find yourself in repossession, but you also have to have all those qualities we talked about. But generally speaking, you're going to be somewhat disagreeable to be able to swim opposite the stream, to be able to repossess a car. So how does that skill set help you in managing? I'm sure at this point you're managing managers, but um, over the years you've had to manage very different personalities.
I mean, that's a great question, and I think the way I lead, James, is I lead with cooperation, meaning I believe in a co-op way of thinking, meaning although I have the veto power, I want buy-in from every person I'm talking to, whether it's a lot person or one of my higher up my managers. I want them to tell me what they think about what I've presented them with. Um, Even if it's a disciplinary deal, I want to make sure, and I taught my managers when we're talking to our employees, it's the good, bad, good. So I tell you the good about yourself. When we have a meeting, I insert the negative, and I leave you walking away, building you back up the good of what I see. But I believe in giving people the opportunity to be participants in your mindset, not just ruling with this is what you do because I can, but bringing them in to the decision. Ultimately, a decision has to be made. What I found out is a lot of employees have a better decision than you do, but you have to give them space to talk. And every manager I have in this building has come up from the grassroots. They didn't have no educational background in management. The leadership they earned and learned was from being here with me and us learning and growing together. So I believe in the co-op way of thinking rather than I'm the president of the company and thus say you must do. That's not my thought process.
So you've talked about some very humble beginnings, and you've talked about different um, bootstrapping that you went through, but you also over that time, um, despite the different challenges that you had before you and the different things you were doing, you also obtained a criminal justice degree, from what I understand.
I did. So when I lost, Alicia and I had to lose the Alsco business. For 2 years, we ran our transport business. And during that time, I went back to school because I understood that running a business takes more than just gut. You have to understand trends. You have to understand business. And I learned business all on the fly. So it was developed through gut. And I'm not saying you have to have a business degree or any degree to, for that matter, to go through and run and on a business, a successful business. What I'm saying for me, that's what I needed. I needed some tutelage that I did not have. I got that during those 2 years. I went back, got my degree. I went to leadership classes every Sunday, 2 times a week, sometimes, just understanding leadership and how system thinking is the way you run a business. You incorporate that mentality into running things, and there's a seat on the bus for everyone, and we have to ensure that everyone occupies the right seat. And I'm the bus driver. That sense of thinking brought me to where I am today. Um, I believe in managing, but I believe in a system. So getting my degree, going out and getting my because I've been a PI here in the state for 29 years now. Getting all those requirements, in my belief, was something I needed to just showcase a reason for a bank to come to me. Actually, benefited me more than it did them because it grew me as a man, as a business owner, and as a person altogether in how I interact with other people.
Great. Um, the I guess the thing that would be a good transition back to, you touched on ARA, and we started to go down that path a little bit. And the yesteryear versus the transition. And I think, gosh, there's a ton of people that are responsible for the wonderful transition that ARA has made, and
Yes,
the wonderful pieces that they've built around that organization. But I I couldn't help but be extremely fortunate to be around you during that time period.
yes,
Um, and there was years before that where they were building up to this moment. Um, and all of those decisions led to you, in my opinion. And maybe many others share the same opinion. But I think your presidency was a defining change, um, embarked on by the prior leadership, and credit where credit's due for making those decisions to get you into that opportunity to then be voted by the members.
yes.
But what you did and how you led, and how you built a bigger tent, I think is a, I'm paying you a compliment here, but there's also a question within this somewhere. Um,
I got it. I got it,
I
James. I know
can't, I
exactly what
can't,
you're saying.
I
I know what you're
can't
saying.
help but be so proud of that moment, and just being there and then seeing that as this defining moment. What would you like to share from that moment in time?
Yeah,
What are you most proud of?
I tell you, one of the things I will tell you is this: Alicia and I was going through one of our hiccups years ago, and a very good friend of mine, who was a part of our church, came in and told me about how pride comes before the fall. And it was that day, probably some 25, 30 years ago, that I understood that I never want to take on a sense of pride. Um, if I look at the ARA presidency, I was honored to take the baton. I think of that, the ARA, as running a race, and each board, each president, each executive director, they held the baton and passed it over to someone else. And as the baton moved through the channel, it's supposed to get better, and I think it did. But I could never say it was so much of me more than it was the people I surrounded myself with, um, that were able to, I was able to listen to, once again, that active listening, and then be able to benefit from their expertise and their experiences and their leadership. And together, we were able to move the industry just a notch. And I think the leadership there now has an opportunity and a responsibility to continue to move us forward. Um, so that was a beautiful time for me because I grew through that experience. So I'm honored, like I said earlier,
Yeah,
to have had the
absolutely.
opportunity to be the president.
Yeah, you
Because
you very much carry a servant leadership mindset, and that comes from probably many different areas, but it also comes from your faith.
yes,
And I think that the right leader at the right time, and someone who's willing to. It's very difficult to have a strong opinion when it begins to affect you personally and financially.
yes,
Um,
yeah,
and I think that many people in this business have learned that lesson about speaking out and talking, even without having been a president of such a prestigious organization.
yeah. We took a hit on the business during my presidency. Um, we suffered and didn't even really see it until I was into it 3 years. Um, but that's the sacrifice you make where others can't see that through your being the face of, you take your eyes off of things that matter, the things that are paying you. Keep in mind, myself and no other president before me or after have been paid for what they do. And I say that with the board members as well. There's a lot of investment of time that goes with this job. Um,
Right.
and I say I was blessed, but it also taxed us because it was hard. But you're right. Sometimes I was one of those guys who didn't mind, like you, James. I didn't mind speaking, where I thought there was an error or an issue that we needed to bring to the forefront. But some lenders didn't respect that opinion. Um,
What do you
just
think lenders, I guess the same question for lenders and for agencies, but we can start for lenders and stay on that for a moment. What do you think lenders misunderstand about repossession agencies and the employees and the craftsmen, as I'm trying desperately to coin us?
yeah,
Um, what do you think they misunderstand about us,
I really
Chief?
I really think it starts with the respect. Um, they don't really see us as the professionals that we say we are because in most spaces we don't present ourselves as professionals we claim to be. Everything starts at social media space. What you say matters, whether you're talking to one of your friends or whether you're talking on a group chat. If a client can see that, they draw an opinion of you. And because there's so many out there in our space just chattering, it gives a client a perception of us that we're really trying to get away from. Um, and we still have a lot of work to do, James. We have a lot of work to do because we are so divided. Um, a house divided cannot stand. That's biblical. It stands for the truth just in business. Because we're so divisive and divided, because we're so fragmented, it's hard for anyone on the other side, I mean, the client community, to take us serious, you know? So, yeah, what don't the clients understand? They don't understand the cost of doing the business. If you go back, James, and think about all the things that we've given up, um, close fees, storage fees, property, all the things we've given up, and there's a cost. The service is still being provided, and the cost is still there for us. They don't understand that because we haven't forced that in a united, uniform way. Once again, a house divided can't stand, and because we're so divided, it's hard for us to get on one accord and push the point where some folks can't come into our space and dictate what our fees are. I will never stop saying that. It's the moment that we stop saying that with the clients, and they tell you, "Oh, we don't talk about that." Well, that's fine, but we're going to keep talking about it. And when you stop, it empowers them to continue bad behavior. Look at keys. One to come on your lot to cut the keys on your lot. Um, these clients, and I'm not saying all of them, but the folks up in the ivory towers are always looking for ways to poke a hole in what we consider our stronghold. We have our lots. That's a stronghold. But do you really control it? What happens at the contract point where a client says, in order for you to get this contract, you need to allow my key person onto your lot? How many of us will say we're not signing that contract? And if we were to say that, how many of us would really do it? We're in a quagmire, and the clients know that. Say what you want. Clients talk. You know, they call it, when we talk, they call that collusion. You know, we're learning now that we're just having a conversation around standards, but they talk all the time. And what are you doing? How do you do it? Who do you like? Who do you know? And they can actually control this. During COVID, we had the greatest opportunity, in my opinion, to unite. The ARA was holding weekly and biweekly Zoom meetings across the country, and we had open discussions about how we can improve the future of our space. And those calls were full. I mean, it was led by Les McCook, but those calls were full of people, 120 tons. But as soon as COVID stopped, everyone went back to their private spaces. Everyone went back to business as usual. And there was a friend of mine that you all know, good friend, James Cargo. He told me something I'll never forget. And it was, until an agent network comes together, the lending community, we're always going to find that one or two people who don't understand, and their vision will continue. They won't understand the assignment, which is, how do we come together under separate tents, operating as our own individuals, but moving the same platform? He was exactly right, because as soon as COVID ended, everybody went back to their dungeons. But I remain hopeful. So when you say, what does the clients see about us? They see us. They see that we are not professional. Our standards are all over the place. And what we need is accountability, and we shouldn't be fearful of oversight. And I will say this, James, I know you have the same beliefs as I do. I don't want government oversight, but we do need accountability within our walls, whether it's the ARA, the AFA, Eagle 20, or any other group or association that can have members that require them to be beholden to an oversight that's mandated. The cowboy days of the past will always be here.
Houston is actually a pretty good model for this. Texas in general, very much very low percentage of unionization, and a very um, light hand from state oversight.
Yes,
Although there is still oversight, even in some private real estate and building contracts and building inspections, it's not even always done by the city or the state. It's done by an organization or a private entity that's bonded
yes,
and does that inspection oversight throughout the process. And what I found so interesting was that, being in California, but being a Texas son, I kind of have this duality in me where I spend time in Texas, spend time in Houston, and then of course, that's where I was raised, and where my principles really come from. But Texas doesn't have less quality building,
mhm,
and there's not more pollution. Uh, there's not worse water, and there's not, I guess in or around where I was born in LaPorte, around the port, might be a little worse air quality, but
yeah,
not to the degree that it would, the alarmist would say. But yet, this is all maintained through a series of public-private partnerships. Sort of what you're positioning is that a standard for um, a standard for who we are to conduct ourselves as, and what we are as a organization, the standards for what each of our individual agencies do. But rather than just being a state licensing and fee collection scheme,
yes,
that it actually produces real oversight, the values that many of the great clients speak to and actively pursue, that maybe you find that middle ground to create, beyond even just the ARA, but just a national standard of procedures, a national standard of I guess you can name any one of the things, but ultimately the outcome would be that it's somewhat like a guild,
right,
or
yes,
someone like this is popular in Europe where they don't have a union in the traditional sense that we think about in the United States, where they're politically activated and motivated, but they're focused on the quality of the trade.
I will say this, James. I want to make sure we understand what we're dealing with here, just in Texas. So in Texas, they have an entity called the TDLR, the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. That brand, they regulate everything: barbers, real estate agents, towing, but they don't really regulate the repossession space. But if you're going to repossess, you have to have a tow truck. They offer us absolutely nothing but yearly fees, and to your point, a collection of fees in exchange for nothing. Nothing they do protects a consumer or ensures that a person backing up a driveway in a tow truck has the qualification, has been vetted, understands the escalation, understands everything you brought up earlier about what we have to be when we're in these driveways. There's nothing to vet that person. And because of that, anybody with a tow truck that's licensed under TDLR can affect a repossession. And those are the things we must fight to change. And anybody that knows me knows that I'm a fighter and I'm not afraid to jump into a fight. This is a fight that needs to be had. And this is something that we need to take each state by state to develop a deal where we can, and I hate to use this word lightly, but control. But we have to have something in the standard realm that determines whether this person that's behind this truck is has gone through the vetting process where he can face a consumer. And if we lead that with everything we do with the protection of the consumer and bring it down from there, I think we have the ability to reach the people in these states legislation offices and national legislation that can make these changes. But we have to have something that determines who can actually affect a repossession across the country. And until we do that, people are going to continue to, shortchange our professionalism. They're going to continue to make it seem like we really don't matter. That we're the lizards of the world. We just don't matter. We're just a bunch of guys in t-shirts and boots picking up cars, tow jockeys. We are not tow truck drivers. We just happen to tow cars, and
Right.
that's what the country doesn't understand. But we have an opportunity and a responsibility to continue to educate the masses. And from that education, we can slowly put our position in front of folks where it makes sense for us to change the narrative around what we do.
So I want to leave you with the opposite question, and I'm going to allow us to close out um, and to save one for when you want to return.
Okay.
Um, what do agents, whether it be agencies like myself, um, maybe speaking to your prior self at some point along your career, or whether it be the kid who just got out of training 2 weeks ago and he's repossessed his 10th or 12th car. What do they not understand about clients? What have you learned about client relationships, and what have you learned about this business that you can share with us to better understand clients?
That's a great way to end this. Is because we just don't know what we don't know. Here's what I do know: the folks that we interact with, from the clients that we have relationships with, their vendor managers, their liaisons, although they fight for us and they advocate on our behalf, they're not the ones that are making decisions on what ultimately trickles down to us. I think the agents that come into this space have to understand that we need data to provide the higher ups. We can give those to the Dannies, like the Danny over at Ally, the Brett over at Cap One. We can give them this to share with. But right now, they're not getting that information because we're not providing it. Um, these ones that the ones that we talk to day in and day out, I truly believe they care and want the best for us. Problem that I see is that there's profits being made. Going back to the elimination of close fees, the elimination of uh, storage fees and property fees, all those fees that were generated for the business before, they are now being captured and creating profit for the folks in the ivory towers. And why would they want to do anything different? We need data. We need data to show them that this needs to return. I haven't found that secret sauce to present that to them with. But what everyone needs to know, whether you've been in the business for a year or 50 years, is that we must keep embracing higher standards. We must see ourselves investing in definitely safety first, but we must speak with one voice. I believe the future of this industry, instead of watching these other folks, the lenders shape it for us and define us, we must be a part of that. And at the end of the day, you know, it's not about what businesses I've helped built, what titles I've held. I believe my faith and relationship with my God, my marriage to my wife Alicia, my children, my grandchildren, and hopefully that the profession that I found it in, that I helped create um, the bad name for and carry that current bad name. I pray that the legacy I leave is one where we one day, you know, reclaim our space. Um, that's a hope. Um, what do I fear? I fear that we won't get it. The ones that are coming into the business with no standard requirements other than checking a box. You got insurance, you got a lot, you're in. Until we control the space, James, we'll forever be beholden to the folks that control us.
Very well said, Vaughn. And I really appreciate, like I said, I am absolutely honored, and I considered it a duty and a responsibility um, to, you know, have this light uh, on you for an opportunity for people to meet you beyond what they know. But as you've always been, you're such a shining, strong, just magnanimous individual that I'm honored to have you here, and I hope that everybody enjoyed it. Thank you so much.